Welcome to Out of Nowhere, where we talk with marketers, makers, and value creators about where they've been and where they're going next. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, this is Justin Watkins of Native Digital. Today we're talking crypto with Thea Neal from Coinbase. Now, even people who don't understand crypto have heard of Coinbase, but they're a digital currency wallet where people can exchange Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and many others.
I was really excited about Coinbase for a few reasons. The first one, of course, is because it's such a new industry and it's so cool to join a new industry like crypto because it's really the sky's the limit in terms of innovation. Like you're not held back by the traditional thinking. And I think it's kind of like if you think about those brands like Facebook or Twitter, the ones that really launch social media, like I think we're doing the same thing in terms of launching crypto on a mass scale. And so that's very exciting. But also just the culture is very openly intense in a good way. So that's why we have 4 recharge weeks a year. So actually next week we're off the entire week. The whole company shuts down. And we have that moment to like recharge. And I like that pace because it's definitely like during the week, people always laugh when I'm like, when they're like, how many meetings do you have? And I'm like, oh, it's a chill week or chill day. I only have 5 to 8 meetings. It's super mellow. And they're like, wait, that's still a lot. But all of them that I'm working with, like we thrive in that kind of like overachiever atmosphere. And so that was really drove me to it. And then of course, since they're a remote first company, I could live in North Carolina. Like I didn't have to live in an expensive city. If I wanted to move back to Kansas City, like I could do that too. And those were just selling points because, as someone who doesn't have kids, who, doesn't have anything like always tying me down, like I can just go somewhere and, experience that city without being like, oh, well, now I have to leave my job.
So as you're like ramping up on this, like you're learning an industry for the very first time, basically, along with a bunch of other people. Are there things that you're learning about it, finding about it that are more interesting to you than other aspects?
Yeah. So I started using Coinbase in like 2018. And it was like, oh, I'm going to put $20 into Bitcoin and see what happens. Whereas I find like the cryptocurrency exchange is definitely interesting, but what I like looking at is NFTs. That's been kind of like my niche thing that I've gotten into. And I just think it's also because I used to be, and I still kind of am really into like designer bags and designer clothes. And when I'm trying to like explain NFTs to people because they're like a non-fungible token, like what is that? I always use like, okay, well, why are you buying a, $2,500 Louis Vuitton bag when you can get the exact same thing for $50 at Walmart, más o menos? You do it because there's a name behind it and because it's something that it can be attributed to you, like because everyone has deemed this thing to be, worth money. And so I like NFTs in that same realm because it's like a collectible experience of like collecting art, but also you can collect NFTs as a form of status too. And so I just think it's a really cool way to like look at crypto differently and look at ways we're using it in more of a like consumer friendly way and also an investment platform of art.
So I was told recently by a close friend, he said, you have all the attributes of a person who would be really into NFTs. He said, but you're not. He goes, why is that? He's like, you're this, you're this, you're this, you're this. I was like, I'll catch it on the second wave. It's on its first wave right now. It's too early for me. And so that's my old man like perspective. But have you, I'm sure you've met other people who are like all into NFTs. And I'm betting you've probably found like, oh, these are the things that I have in common with people who are really big into NFTs. Like, have you found like a group of people who are like into it as much as you are?
Oh, I think so. The great thing about working at Coinbase is we actually have a Slack channel that is just people talking about NFTs. So it's like very chill. And these are people who have like all of the best NFTs you can possibly have. Like they're so much deeper into this culture than I am. And so there were some things that were happening last week. Bored Ape Yacht Club came out with a new coin, Ape Coin, and we were all like speculating about it internally. And then someone was talking about how someone had done all of these moves on so basically if you owned this NFT, you could then get the ape coin that came with it, like as like a perk of owning the NFT. So another reason why you should buy the NFTs, because then down the line for their whole plan, you get other perks like that. Ultimately someone made like a quick $1 million off of like loaning out an NFT, and it's very complicated. And I didn't understand it at all. And so I just went and commented on this thread, and I was like, hey, for like the newbie here, like what do all these words mean? Because that's the biggest, I think, gatekeeping thing about getting into crypto and NFTs and DAOs and all of that stuff, is because there's so many words that if you just don't know what they mean until someone explains them to you. And it was awesome because at Coinbase, someone just totally broke down the whole scenario for me, like in just like layman's terms. And it's conversations like that, and I have them from my house, and you can have those when you're on, when you join a Discord. Like I just find that people in the space, especially at Coinbase, are really excited to educate other people on it too. And you think that, crypto it could be this like gatekeeping situation of like, oh, we don't want to share our knowledge or funds. And it's so not like that. Like I find that the people at Coinbase that are really into this space, like want to educate people more on it.
So I'm guessing as part of the onboarding process, or maybe in one of these forums, like one of these Slack channels, they've talked about sort of the origin story or like the founding story of Coinbase itself. Like, what's the version that you heard and as you're kind of getting ramped up into the company?
Yeah. So okay. So obviously when I was joining Coinbase, like I knew, okay, it was founded by Brian Armstrong. He went to Rice University. He found a co-founder that had gone to Duke, and like he had worked at Airbnb. Like definitely those kind of like core moments. We knew like his co-founder had gone on to pursue other things, and so like we knew Brian as like this entity who had founded everything after reading, this white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto about Bitcoin in 2000 whatever. The company was founded in 2012. But the best thing that I have listened to was the Guy Raz podcast that Brian was on. I think it was like How We Built This. And it was so enlightening. And I love moments like that because like what blows my mind is like Brian is still very involved, and he still like goes to our town halls, and he still hosts them. And it's really cool to see someone who's like just a few years older than me be very successful and like still very involved. And so I think that whole process, like of watching, even I've only been here for, 5 or 6 months, like it's very inspiring all the time to see a founder who is still involved and still cares and isn't just like, oh, I'm going to make money and leave. Like it's awesome. And it's it's so young. We've only been around since 2012.
Right. I suspect that's how all crypto companies are, or most, I would think. A friend of mine just went to one, and it's the exact same story, but it's a nature of how new the technology is, right? Like it's just new to us, and it hasn't been around for 50, 100 years like some of these other things, right?
Yeah. And I as someone who has worked for 100 and some year old company, like there are definitely perks to both. Like there's definitely a stability in working for a company that old, that is that established, but there's such an excitement, and like I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. Like you kind of have to be a person who is comfortable being on that verge of gasping all the time, because you're not quite sure like what's going to happen. But I think it's the same reason like why some people like to watch like action movies or like suspense movies. Like you like to feel that just like jolt of, oh shit, what's next?
It's a roller coaster ride. I mean, it's any company sort of that many years old is going to be like that. To be in a space that's red hot like crypto right now, it's absolutely going to be like it. And Coinbase is one of those names that's widely known. It's part of the narrative. And I would say day to day or week to week, you can probably check the news on Coinbase, and one day it's going to be way up, and then it's going to go down, then it's going to go way up just in terms of like the sentiment and what people are talking about, just because it's so much is being figured out right now. Like it's wild, wild west days right now.
And so much of it is education. Like I think that as more of like the general public learns more about crypto and like how useful it is and how exciting it is and what a great investment opportunity it can be, like I think our roadmap is very limitless.
So what about in terms of your individual role? Like what's your kind of challenge look like? What's in front of you? What are you trying to solve day to day?
Yeah, so I lead all of our talent brand. So when I started, we had, less than 3,000 employees. We're hoping, I mean, we're hiring so many people all over the world. And when I started, my main goals were to, of course, increase our brand awareness. When people think about, oh, what companies do I want to work for? A lot of times they're like, oh, I want to go to Google, I want to go to Facebook. They have those cool perks, those cool opportunities. I'm going to get paid well. We want people to also think about, coming to Coinbase. And I think too, like having our remote first stance, that helps us a lot because not a lot of companies are that forward about it and like that pressing about it. So we also are launching in Brazil. So we're opening a big tech hub in Brazil. So my goal is to really build out how folks in Brazil look at working with us. And we're doing the same thing with India. So that real like geographic expansion has been exciting for me because at my last role, we already had that down. We already knew how to reach people in India. We already knew how to get, folks in the Philippines to come work with us. But now I'm looking at an entirely different group of people, like recruiting for cryptographers, like looking at, back-end engineers and front-end engineers and figuring out like what makes them want to come to a job or what makes them think about, changing jobs has been a really fun challenge. And my team also includes events. So we look at where, your recruiters should show up or what should be sponsored by Coinbase or what kinds of hackathons we should host. But really at the end of the day, like we just want to be the number one crypto company in the world to work for, which is is really our goal. But like my personal goal is like, I want to be the number one company in the world to work for, period. The crypto line kind of identifier isn't as important to me.
I mean, I'm sure the name helps a lot. I mean, everybody knows if you know crypto, you know Coinbase, I would assume. But man, recruiting's tough. I have a friend who works at Adidas, and it was a few months ago. She put out a thing. She's in talent as well, and she's like, "Hey, if you see one of your recruiter friends, like give them a hug. It's hard out there right now. Like it's because it's
Yes,
just yeah, it's that we're seeing like employment patterns like we've never seen before. Like people are doing like crazy things, honestly. And so
Yeah.
I'm sure you're seeing that as well. You're more of on the brand side, so maybe you're not seeing it as much on like the day to day. But I mean, what are you running into right now? I'm sure it's not smooth sailing all the time. I'm sure you're running into some kind of gnarlier challenges occasionally, right?
Yeah, I mean, everyone is always talking about the great resignation, but I like to think that people really during COVID changed how they think about work. So really it's less everyone was like, hey, I want to quit my jobs. It was just that people were thinking, hey, I need to reprioritize my life. So if I'm not happy in this job and I'm tired of commuting to this job or I have a bad boss, like now's the time to go. I Our challenges are really because a lot of times we're looking for very specific talent. Like a cryptographer. Like last week I learned there's a huge number of cryptographers that live in Israel. So now we're looking at like, oh, should we think about that as a place that we, recruit from? But that's the cool thing about Coinbase too, is like everything is so remote. So lots of times I don't have to think, in my previous roles, it was how would I find someone that's based in this one city? Whereas now it's like you can look all over. I mean, I think the other challenge too is like getting folks to have the same kind of excitement to join a crypto company that they would to join a traditional tech company that has already like educated the masses on why they exist. Like we know why Google exists. We know why Microsoft exists, like that sort of thing. So teaching people of like, hey, you don't have to be nervous about joining us because Bitcoin is down. Like, and that's the biggest thing too. And even, just because a certain cryptocurrency worth is lower, I mean, that doesn't mean Coinbase is in a bad spot. That doesn't mean that things aren't going to improve. It doesn't mean we can't survive a crypto winter. So I think people are naturally nervous about leaving roles. And so to take the chance to go somewhere where they think like, oh, I don't fully know about this space as much, could this be bad, is probably a challenge.
Yeah. When our team is working with a technology company and they're asking us to do brand strategy and messaging, one of the audiences, they're typically looking at customers, and it's like customer acquisition centric, right? But we've always insisted on also having a value prop and messaging geared towards talent, because hard to have a company without talent, right? But that's usually not what's on the marketer's mind, right? How often are you, like, in terms of your value prop versus Coinbase's value prop towards a customer, how aligned do you think those are, or do you feel like they kind of function independently of each other? And are you guys moving so fast where you're kind of operating in different lanes, or do you make a point to come together and make sure that we're all singing from the same songbook?
Yeah, that's a good question. So our brand marketing team and our talent brand team, we're pretty tight. Like there's definitely opportunities where we could be even tighter, but that's just the nature of like how fast crypto is moving. And also their goals are oftentimes like revenue and acquisition. And my goal is so much deeper than that. So I think it's a little bit of me wanting to take current customers and turn them into employees. So like if you're someone who's already using Coinbase and you like using Coinbase and you care about crypto, like that's the kind of person that I want to come work at Coinbase, especially. But if you're on the, the brand marketing team, you already have that person, like, okay, cool. Now I'm on to find another person. Whereas me, I'm like, okay, let's take these great consumers and these great customers and figure out how we get them to work for us or with us.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, because you would assume that some of your best employees probably have been with Coinbase for a while, right? Like, and if not, they're at least aware of it and maybe using something complementary to that. So that's an interesting concept. It's like an evolution of a customer. Like some of the best might actually be candidates for employment, right?
Right. Yeah. And if you're already passionate about crypto, then you're going to be passionate about working here, because that's really what we're doing all the time, is like figuring out ways to make crypto more accessible. And our true goal at the end of the day, our mission is to increase economic freedom everywhere. So if you also care about the altruism of it, like we work on videos about we have a teammate who uses crypto in Mexico to like build schools. So like that's the kind of stuff where we want to create videos about it, because then if you're someone who's also into like cause-based roles, then you're going to be more likely to want to work with Coinbase, because like we're really putting our our money where our mouth is, and like we're hiring people who care about this mission as much as we do.
Do you find that there's certain channels where you can reach, and maybe it differs from role to role or discipline to discipline, but are there, you mentioned trade shows, I think you said, but like, are there certain channels that you find is kind of like where future Coinbase employees hang out?
I think that they're kind of all over. We've had some really good success lately with targeting recruitment, like hiring ads to platforms where developers or like engineers spend time, like open source platforms too. And so Slashdot has been a really, really awesome company to work with. They're a media company. They own a whole bunch of websites that aren't sites that I go to personally, but we've had really great numbers with working with them. And that's the cool thing about like recruitment and talent marketing, is that you can't really look at it the same way you look at all other branding, because you have to consciously get in the spaces where these people are have the right skills that you want, B, care about crypto or care about your company, and then C, are willing to actually do the work from that ad or from that post to like convert into an application. And I'm very grateful because Coinbase has a very simple application form. In other companies I've worked at, it has been very hard. So like folks who are in talent brand, and if your API or your APS structure is difficult, like that's a huge roadblock.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. What's next for you? I mean, when you look at like the challenges ahead, I mean, it sounds like there's just unlimited opportunity with the role, and you've taken a big goal and made it even bigger by removing the crypto out of your goal?
Yeah.
Like what do you see? What's the next big hurdle in front of you that you're looking at?
It's hard for me to think of like one big hurdle. I really go back to like, I want more people to think about Coinbase as an employer, as a top employer, as like the place they want to go to. And I think I'm really able to do that because our brand marketing team also does an incredible job. I mean, Super Bowl commercial, loved that. That was great for us. Like we got, much more eyes to our careers page because of that. But I think I'm looking at it much more as like a marathon rather than a sprint. And I very much expect that within the next year, when I listen back to this podcast, I'm going to have entirely different goals. But yeah, I think it's so hard to name one thing that I am really, looking at, because I truly feel like the world is our oyster. Like we have so many opportunities to just like kill this and just really be incredible.
Yeah, sometimes it's just keeping your feet moving and never slowing down or stopping, right?
Yeah, minus our recharge weeks. I mean, I think a really great thing we did last year was we launched Live Crypto, which is really our employer brand tagline. And we've done a really conscious job of like using that everywhere in all of our content. And then it's fun too to see like random people now just like start using that same hashtag on Twitter. And I mean, it's been fun to really see our work and talent brand evolve even into like brand marketing.
What has been probably the most rewarding thing since joining? Is there a particular story or something that you think about that you're just like, that was pretty cool?
Oh man, there's so many. Um, watching how our team pulled off the brand marketing team pulled off the Super Bowl commercial was so crazy and cool. I was like very stoked for them on that. But in terms of like talent brand, I mean, we went from being like a one person team in 2021, and now there's about to be 5 of us in 2022. So that's awesome. And I think the biggest thing too is like our leadership really cares about talent brand. And if you're a company whose leadership is kind of like, oh, the recruiters will figure it out, like they'll hire people, like they'll build us a talent brand. Like I don't think that recruiters can always build a brand marketing strategy the same way that someone with a consumer background can. And so that's where I feel very blessed, because there are people on my team that came from consumer backgrounds. There are people on my team that were once candidate, outreach specialists. There's someone on my team who's a code school dropout. So like really, we all know the different areas of it. And so I think probably my biggest win this year so far is just watching how we have taken our website visits for our page have gone up like 58% in 1 quarter. And I really think that's because we're just dedicating so many resources to it.
The Super Bowl ad, in some ways, the people that you want to hire, I'm assuming they've known Coinbase for a long time, but some of the masses have not. And I would imagine that, and you also probably have, I'm going to guess, like a younger workforce. But I wonder if it helps, like for the people who are considering it and they're asking mom and dad, like, yeah, between this one and this one, they're like, Coinbase, I've never heard of Coinbase. Like it probably helps with those conversations where they're like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, they're a big deal, I've heard of them.
Oh yeah, I went to the eye doctor last week and he was like, "Where do you work?" And I was like, "Coinbase." And he was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "We had the Super Bowl commercial with the QR code." And he's like, "Oh, okay, I know what you're talking about."
That's so funny.
Yeah, for conversations.
Someone a couple of times a year, someone will ask me like the value of a brand, and it's somebody who doubts it. That they just haven't worked somewhere where a brand was like valued highly, and so they're trying to figure out like, how much do I invest in this? What's the value of it? And one of the easy ways for usually somebody who doubts it, usually they do understand sales. And not my stock answer, but one of the things I'll say is like, hey, if you reach out to somebody you want to hire or somebody you want to have a conversation with, and they see where you work, is it valuable for them to say yes versus just, move on past that email? They're like, yeah, it's incredibly valuable. They're like, is it frustrating when they don't respond? They're like, yeah, it's incredibly frustrating. Like, that's what brand does. Like, they see the name and they're like, oh, well, I'll have a conversation. right? And so to
Yeah.
me, like that goes in line with what you're doing every day, right? You're in talent brand, and if the brand name means something, people will at least humor a conversation with Coinbase versus, some other place that isn't investing in it. They're just like, never heard of this place, sounds sketchy. I'm not replying to this. But I'm sure you get
Right.
conversations that you want, right? Because of the investment in brand.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I had an Uber ride the other day, actually coming back from my eye appointment, and the guy was asking me again where I worked, and I was like Coinbase, and then he went on this whole like spree of complaining about another crypto company for like 15 minutes, and I was like, awesome, I'm glad that wasn't us. Like, that's great. My brand mention led to event, and I'm glad that it was an event about us.
You could probably do a talk. Maybe your next talk will just be like, what happened to me on the way to the eye doctor? And it's
Yeah,
like,
it
who
was
knows
wild.
us, who doesn't? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And they were totally different, like demographics, different ages. Like, yeah, that would be good. Thanks for the idea.